ហើយ Gas ម៉ាស៊ីនត្រជាក់ DuPont របស់សហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកឈានមកគេនៅក្នុងឧស្សាហកម្មបរិក្ខារត្រជាក់ជាង80ឆ្នាំ DuPont ភាពអស្ចារ្យនៃវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រ
Good evening, Excellency, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Cambodia Global Dialogue of Southeast Asia TV. Today, I have the pleasure to have a friend of mine who happened to be in town attending a conference, CDI ANZ Economic Outlook Conference, and he brought with me a latest book that he proudly gave to me. It's called the ASEAN Economic Community, Work in Progress, and he's one editor, and the other editor is a former ASEAN Secretary General. It's called the ASEAN Economic Community, and this is the topic that I thought that a lot of people now want to know. What happened in 2015 when Cambodia joined the ASEAN Economic Community? A lot of misperception, misunderstanding, a lot of fear, a lot of hope. So I thought that since my friend is in town, I invite him to come to the studio and have a nice exchange about the book, of course, and I'm pretty sure that from the book he can share with us a bit what is his view on the future of Cambodia in the ASEAN Economic Community. So, Jay, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Siphana.
Yes.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, Jay, you are with the Asian Development Bank. You're a lead economist, specializing in trade and regional cooperation. Interesting. But I will let you, talk straight to the audience a bit about your background.
Sure. Thank you, Siphana. And again, thank you for the pleasure of inviting me on to be in your program. Very briefly, I guess I'm an economist by training. I started my career actually in academia. I used to work at Monash University in Melbourne.
Yes.
And then I decided to do more development and policy-related work in Asia.
Yes.
And joined the ADB some 15 years ago now.
Oh,
yes.
When you were much younger.
When I was much younger, yes, that's right. Yeah, but I'm not telling you my age.
Yeah. But you have no gray hair, so it's okay.
Oh, there's technology nowadays to deal with that. But actually, my first overseas consulting assignment with ADB was to help first prepare Cambodia and Laos, PDR, for membership of ASEAN. Yeah.
Wow, 15 years ago, meaning about 99.
Yes, actually.
98,
no, this was when I was still a consultant.
Yes, yes.
So
yes.
this was actually 96, 97.
Yes, yes.
When I first came to...
because Cambodia joined, we were the last one to join in
right.
99.
Exactly, yes.
Did you work with CICP at that time?
Yes, I did.
Right.
I did with Excellency
Kalkumun,
as
yes.
well. Yeah, that's right. And also the impacts of joining ASEAN.
Yes.
So it's interesting now, I've come full circle. Those days it was ASEAN, and of course after.
Yes.
And now we are looking, 17 years later, or actually 15 years for Cambodia, at the ASEAN Economic Community.
Yes.
Yes, AEC. So,
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I would say that Cambodia is since 1993. I mean, if we go back a little bit backward to the Paris Peace Accord, we came out, from scratch, try to rebuild the nation, try to reintegrate into the community of nations, at least to start with from the region, and then a big push to join the WTO.
Yes.
And I think that was a watershed effort, to
sure.
liberalize the economy,
Yes.
welcome the
Thanks
investment
to
to
your
the country.
efforts,
Well,
doing that.
thanks to a lot of people in the government, in the private sector, in development partner like yourself,
Sure.
helping. And so I can see it's a lot of economic activity that you probably witnessed that now you visit in Cambodia.
Absolutely.
But the future, the ASEAN leader is pushing to have this ASEAN economic community, free flow of investment, service, free flow of skilled labor, capital. From your perspective, what do you see a small country like Cambodia, like Laos,
Yeah.
Because when you're a big country, maybe you behave differently.
Sure.
But what's the prospect for a small country like Cambodia?
Sure. I think, what you said earlier on was very interesting of how, following the Paris Peace Accords, how Cambodia has come so far and so quickly, actually.
Yes.
In fact, I often want to write an article titled Asia's True Economic Miracle. They talk about the miracle economies, the newly industrializing economies of Singapore, Taiwan, Korea, South Korea, and so on. But I think Cambodia is the true economic in terms of how far they've come in that period of time.
Yes.
From almost nothing to where we are today. So the percentage change is the largest for sure.
Yes.
Right? And the absolute changes, of course, might vary, but across other countries, in percentage change terms, I think it's been dramatic. And but another interesting, I think, an indirect benefit of starting from so little is that you also didn't inherit a lot of bad policy or bad institutions.
Yes.
Right? I mean, a good example is just to look. Yes, I mean, compared to Cambodia's immediate neighbors, like Laos, PDR, and Cambodia, for instance, these are countries struggling dealing with state-owned enterprises, which have developed over many years. They're entrenched interests. They're very difficult to actually disentangle. And they, as I said, interfere in all facets of economic and political activity. And so Cambodia, luckily, doesn't have that burden inherited from the past. And Cambodia is a very open economy and always has been the most open, actually, amongst all the new members of ASEAN. And so, in some sense, they already had a head start in preparing for the AEC.
For the AEC.
Right. And in fact, the amount of work needed in terms of policy changes is a lot less than many countries in ASEAN. But most of the work, of course, is involved in terms of institution building. And, of course, when they say preparing for the AEC, right? I mean, I think it's equal to saying, preparing for becoming a middle-income country. Right? It's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
That's right. It's all part of the same development process.
Because Cambodia, in a few years' time, we will graduate from the low-income country to a lower middle
and heading towards upper middle, of course, hopefully by 2030. That's right. That's the trajectory.
So you see some semblance, some similarity of that trend, of that effort, of that path. Right. Yes.
Absolutely. That's right. And
because in what way?
Okay. I think you can see how catch up, which is what is happening now in Cambodia and its neighbors, right? Catch up growth to the other, say, original ASEAN countries involves, much higher rates of economic growth than the others, and this is almost difficult not to do, right? Even if you try, it's hard not to do it because capital labor ratios are still low. So even a little bit of capital added to labor increases productivity by huge amounts.
Wow.
And then there's also this sort of latecomer advantage, as they say.
What do you mean by latecomer advantage?
Let me give you an example. It's like instead of investing huge amounts in infrastructure for lined telecommunication, wired communication. Just go cell phones. Right?
Skip the learning curve.
Who needs? Not everyone needs a wired connection anymore. In fact, if they want wired connection, there should be fiber optic. Right? Forget the old technology. Move straight to the internet technology, and therefore you don't need to. You save a lot of resources by coming in after things have changed in terms of technology leapfrogging.
Gas ម៉ាស៊ីនត្រជាក់ឌូផុនរបស់សហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកឈានមកគេនៅក្នុងឧស្សាហកម្មបរិក្ខារត្រជាក់ជាង80ឆ្នាំឌូផុនភាពអស្ចារ្យនៃវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រ
When I talk to a lot of people and they're so fixated with the date December 15, right? I say, look, ASEAN Economic Community, as your book rightly said, it's a work in progress.
Right. That's right.
December 2015, you will not see a transformation black to white to green. No, it's not.
Nothing,
It's a process. It's a progress.
Yep.
It's a journey.
Yep.
And I think because if you look, ASEAN Economic Community work is not a monolith.
No, that's right.
It's many different things
Yep.
that make up the community.
Exactly. That's right. Absolutely.
Would you agree with that one?
I do fully. I think what you said is exactly the way we need to look at the AEC. Let's forget about deadlines.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I mean, one thing that's clear, and this is not controversial, because ASEAN's own assessment shows that they probably won't meet a lot of their own targets.
Yes.
Right? So it's not anyone else but themselves, right, based on the scorecard. So that doesn't matter. I mean, you don't need to hit every target on 31st December 2015, right? It's a process, it's a work in progress, and it's a milestone, right? It can create momentum for reform as we get closer, but it really has to continue way past that.
Yes. The Cambodian metaphor will be the train left the station already.
Right.
Stop here and there, but it will get there.
It will get there, the destination eventually, but we don't know when. And the important thing is you keep moving in the right direction.
I feel that, working with the ASEAN, process, recently I've been appointed by the foreign minister that I'm now the Cambodian representative to the high-level task force to strengthen ASEAN and related organ. So I would say this is another effort that, as you just said, that the ASEAN themselves recognize that we may not meet all the targets.
Exactly.
But at least there are a conscious initiative to say, okay, having said that, what do we have to do to push more? So I think from the psychological side, it's more meaningful in the sense that, it's like you make mistake or you're too slow, but if you don't recognize, but here we recognize, hey, we're too slow. Oh my God, we didn't do right on this one. Okay, what do we have to do?
Absolutely. I think it's a sign of maturity, as you say. That's right, that you can recognize that, this is unlikely to be met. And, come 2015, I'm sure there'll be a huge celebration.
Yes.
And the famous sort of hand-holding and so on. But the post-2015 agenda is already being discussed. But I'd like to make another point related to this. When we say, what does it mean to say, have we met the sort of, ambitions of the AEC? Very often we're talking about the agreements and the accords, right? That's really only half the story.
Of the story, yes.
The main, in my view, the main
the
action,
other half?
Is when you go home, after all the signing and the press coverage, go home to your individual parliaments and work with your politicians to implement them and ratify them. And often you might require, you might have to change domestic laws to implement them efficiently. And who's checking on this? Right? This is where the monitoring suddenly becomes goodwill. Right? Signing agreements, everyone looks at that. Everyone's wondering, okay, how many have been signed? How many haven't been signed? What's the deadline? But the implementation, which is where change happens, is critical.
Jay, I thought I'd share with you an anecdote because this morning I was co-chairing a meeting at the Ministry of Post and Telecom with the private sector who are working on ICT. The meeting is all about bringing together the private sector who are in the ICT business, adopting, commenting on the ICT master plan. And it's interesting that the ICT master plan is driven by what the ASEAN leader in 2011 has adopted the ASEAN ICT master plan. So, well, you see, like you say, we're 3 years behind a bit, but now that the country is grappled with it, you have a framework.
That's right.
So now we say, okay, our ICT master plan have to reflect the vision of the ASEAN. ASEAN want to be a sort of like a mini hub like the Silicon Valley, right?
Exactly.
Okay, that's what we have to do at the ASEAN level. But then, if Cambodia at the sub-ASEAN level would like to be another sub-hub, what do we have to do?
Exactly.
So I think implementation matter.
Absolutely.
Setting the large framework does give a certain sense of direction.
Exactly. That's right. It allows, I think, countries like Cambodia to buy in very easily to ongoing sort of frameworks that are being established, and there are benefits from being part of that framework. Yes, that's right. That flow directly through trade and so on. But I think you also raised another interesting point about the role of the private sector in the AEC, right? Yes. And this is going to be the make or break, of the AEC, right?
Because they're the ones who trade.
They're the ones who trade. They're the ones that create jobs. They're the ones that create opportunities and, create the revenues of governments to provide social services, right? So, and unfortunately, the awareness is still low. A lot of work needs to be done.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Jay, give me a gist of what you have found out from this book.
Okay, great.
This is important. and by the way, this book you can download, and what's the website?
Okay. In fact, you can go to the ADB website.
Yes.
It'll be there, www.adb.org, or the ARIC website.
Yes.
It is aric.adb.org.
All right.
Or just Google ADB AEC, and you'll certainly find it.
Good. So you make sure you
free of charge.
Yeah, free of charge. All right.
That's right.
Cool. So go ahead.
Okay. So this study actually was requested by the ASEAN Secretariat.
Okay.
They asked ADB to undertake a study that looks at the barriers and the impediments to realizing the AEC by its deadline. And so ADB decided to partner with the Institute of Southeast Asian Studies
in Singapore.
That's right. In fact, with the ASEAN Studies Center, which is headed by Rod Severino, former ASEAN Sec-Gen, and very good academic as well now. And Sanchita Das and Omkar Shrestha. These are the four co-editors of the book.
Yes.
But we had a lot of experts in different fields who were commissioned to write papers on areas like intellectual property protection, competition law, FTAs, services, trade, non-tariff barriers, a whole gamut, including institutional building and dispute settlement agreements. So there's chapters that deal with all of these issues. But broadly, the overall messages that come out of this book is that, firstly, as you said earlier, don't get obsessed with the deadline. Treat it as a milestone. Right? Keep the work going on. Secondly, sign all the agreements that make sure they're implemented legitimately. And the last message, I guess, is that in the ASEAN economic community, when it's realized in whatever form, it needs to really fit in with the broader regional architecture and global architecture. So this is only one piece of the puzzle, and how that piece, whether it fits neatly or becomes crumbled, is critical going forward, because there's so many things going on.
Give me some example in terms of fitting into the global architecture.
Okay, right. Let me illustrate with an example, as you say. Let's say, ASEAN is looking to set up sort of, phytosanitary standards.
SPS.
SPS for its food and so on. One has to wonder whether it needs a separate set of standards for ASEAN versus international rule, right? So you don't want to do things duplicatively, and that's something
you don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly,
like they say.
That's right. You've got limited resources. Everyone is tied up doing so many things. So why have one just for ASEAN, and then go back and then say, oh, WTO, we also have to do this again there.
Ghéម៉ាស៊ីនត្រជាក់ឌូផុនរបស់សហរដ្ឋអាមេរិកឈានមកគេនៅក្នុងឧស្សាហកម្មបរិក្ខារត្រជាក់ជាង80ឆ្នាំឌូផុនភាពអស្ចារ្យនៃវិទ្យាសាស្ត្រ
Dispute settlement is another issue. That's
Yes.
right. Yes.
Yeah.
In fact, ASEAN's dispute settlement, isn't attractive when the WTO one exists and is working quite well. Right. Everyone tends to first look to the WTO whenever they want to address these issues. Yeah, that's right. So that's another area where one has to think about whether we need the same thing at the regional, sub-regional, regional, and multilateral levels. Right? Some things, yes, but a lot of things, no. And this is where it's important to think broadly, especially when things are going on at the same time, like the ASEAN Plus 6 FTA, RCEP, or Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, has the same deadline as the AEC, right? Yeah, exactly the same deadline. So, and this is something that involves all the ASEAN countries, right? And important large neighbors. Okay. So, and of course the TPP is going on. The meeting in Singapore didn't produce any outcome, but every year they say next year. I mean, I think they're getting closer, and 4 ASEAN countries are already in it, and a lot of ASEAN Plus 6 countries. So all these things are going on, and we need to make sure that they don't contradict each other. Yeah, and it's not easy to get convergence, but we have to work at it.
But at least there's no divergence.
Yes, that's right. There doesn't seem to be divergence, which is a good thing.
So at some point there have to be some compromise,
That's right.
And I think at the end of the day, it has to be an ASEAN thing.
Right.
Why do we have to have somebody else's model, right?
Correct.
You see, so...
yes, ASEAN is different. And it's different in good ways.
ASEAN made it that far from a political institution into to be a true community now.
Absolutely, yes.
It must have gone through its own ASEAN way.
That's right.
Which sometimes people criticize, but it works.
It works, yes. And it's the most successful grouping amongst developing countries in the world.
Yes.
Right, the most resilient. I like to think of the type of regionalism in ASEAN as first outward looking. Right.
Open regionalism.
Yes, open regionalism in the true sense. It's institution light, right? We don't have a Brussels. And we can't afford a Brussels.
Yes, and we don't want
We don't want a Brussels. Yes, look at what's going on in Europe right now. That's right. And this is mainly because the rich countries in ASEAN are also small. Singapore and Brunei. We don't have, France and Germany to pay for.
To pay the bill.
Yes, exactly. So, but we don't want that, as you say, and we don't want it. And it's also market-driven, right? So the regionalism is designed as a means, not an end in itself, and that's how it should be, right? And most of ASEAN's trade is still with countries outside its own. Most of its foreign investment comes from outside its own, and that's fine, right? And if you recognize that and make sure you don't create a fortress, then it's a real stepping stone towards multilateralism. And that's how it's worked so far.
So last word on the work in progress of the AEC. What's your last word?
All right.
I say last word. I didn't say the message yet. You still have to have a message.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. I think, well, firstly, I'll encourage your audience to try and have a look at it. It's free. A whole book is available free of charge to be downloaded. I guess, from Cambodia's perspective especially, the AEC is not going to be a huge game changer for anyone, right? It's like, the development challenges and overcoming them and moving towards better standard of living. But I think, just getting to a higher standard of living in terms of higher average per capita income is not the full story, right? What does it really mean if it involves a lot of inequality, if there's still a lot of polarization? That's a hollow victory in sort of moving up the development ladder. The AEC hopefully will create a more inclusive type of growth. Of course, it involves national actions at the end of the day, right? Governments in all the member countries, including Cambodia, will have to make changes, grasp the opportunities that the AEC presents, right? But it's a great opportunity to actually do a lot of things in terms of, a bigger market in this region.
Yes.
Cambodia trades a lot outside the region, US, EU, very little within the region, but that's beginning to change,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's
Indeed.
becoming part of the production network
Yes.
now, and the AEC will be an important, vehicle to facilitate that.
Yes.
If Cambodia takes the opportunity, takes advantage of it.
Yes. All right. Jay, well, thank you, my friend. Thank you for coming on a short notice to share, and in fact to launch the book here
right.
in Cambodia.
Yes.
So let me just say on behalf of the studio and the Cambodian audience, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
Great pleasure.
Well, as always, I find great pleasure when I could find somebody who I can discuss with on the issue of the ASEAN Economic Community. And this last 30 minutes going over this book, it's quite a revelation in the sense that it confirmed my feeling that, let's not all get excited that December 2015 it's going to change everything. It's not, but it's a work in progress. But having said that, we as Cambodians, whether we're in government, we're in the private sector, the academia, the student even, we have to make our business to know more about this ASEAN economic community, right? Because at the end of the day, the government will do its job. We will sign agreement like Jay mentioned, we will go and negotiate, we will have an accord, but ultimately it becomes a national action. What do we want to get out of it? We are about to transform from a least developed country to a low middle income country. And Jay, I put it in a nice way to say that your path is toward the ASEAN economic community. It's the same path as you're moving up from the lower income country to a low middle income country. So there are opportunities arising from this regional integration. There are opportunity, for being part of the regional supply chain. There's opportunity, to take advantage of all this larger market size. But I think the gist of it is that we must make our business to know more about it. Because at the end of the day, knowledge is power. And that is why I would strongly recommend that you go and download the book, right? And then hopefully, some of you will be able to get some of this idea from the book and to say, look, I can apply in my life. If I'm a trader, the chapter on trader good is very helpful. If I'm now working on software development, the intellectual property section is very important. If I'm an architect or I'm a dentist, I find that the section on mutual recognition arrangement in the service sector is very helpful. I don't know what, but all I'm saying is that knowledge is power, and to have such a concise, book written by authority like my friend Jay, it's something that we should cherish. So on that note, I suggest you download it and enjoy the reading. And I'll bring more people who will come over the months to speak more about the various aspects of this upcoming game-changing for Cambodia. Maybe not for the region, but for Cambodia as a small country, very liberal, very open, very active member in the WTO process. We will take advantage of this economic integration. And I think that if I can make the metaphor, I say that entering the WTO in 2014 was the first wave of game-changing dynamics, because it opened the country, it liberalized the economy, right? Now, moving to this ASEAN economic community, it will be the second wave, of the game-changing dynamics. I don't know what will be the third wave, but for sure the second wave will bring, prosperity, will bring wealth, will bring job, employment, and hopefully more equity for our society. So on that note, good night.